Hello, good evening, and welcome to the TNT Show. My name is John Drummond, and I'm your host for the next 60 minutes. And we have a particularly exciting 60 minutes ahead. But let's not get into that right now. Let's just summarize some of the things that have been happening. Each week, I point out that it's been a great day for British democracy. And here's another classic. It would appear, according to the public prints, that the Labour Party is revolting. Now, some of you will be saying, I knew that already, John. But nonetheless, this revolt is taking a practical form for a change. Of course, not in Scotland, because most of the Labour MPs in Scotland are on borrowed time. But outside of Scotland, there's a great and growing anxiety, partly caused by the results of the local elections and the by-elections in England and Wales. But it's interesting to note that some of that concern, the sense of revolt, is coming from Labour MPs in the north of England. And that's being reflected in some of the feedback out of Wales too, where there seems to be a growing concern that Plaid Cymru will increasingly dominate the political landscape there. Now, that situation in Wales is greatly aided by the fact that the BBC in Wales is largely impartial, which is, of course, nothing you could accuse BBC Scotland of being. But, of course, that will change in due course as they have to, I suspect, move from being supportive of the Labour Party in Scotland to start cozy up to reform, because it would appear that the Labour Party has slumped so far in the polls in Scotland that they've been replaced by reform. And since the whole point, it seems to me, unless I'm hugely mistaken, of BBC Scotland's political output is to ensure that the support for independence is reduced as much as it can practically be, that means they have to choose another horse to ride. And if the Labour Party's horse is completely enfeebled, then they have to choose somebody else. And it looks like the only group they can use, because the Conservative Party appears to be now in terminal decline and being replaced by reform throughout the UK. The only horse they can possibly ride in the future, it would be reform. So it'll be interesting to see, as and when they sit down and have an editorial meeting and decide which group to support in future, if they don't plump for reform. So look for much more positive coverage of reform in Scotland. That's my forecast for today, for what it's worth. Anyway, enough of all that. Let's move on to the meat of the programme, if I can call it that. We're joined tonight by Jason Baird and Lynn Hastie. Now, why? Well, we've been talking about Get Counted and the National Yes Registry. This is a focus on getting those who are sympathetic to major constitutional change, i.e. independence, together to form a larger and more united front. So, without any further ado, let me welcome Jason and Lynn. Hi, folks, how are you? Lynn, first of all, how are you?
I'm very good, thank you, John, and I'm glad to see you're looking so well yourself.
Oh, you're more than kind. I think your glasses are even worse than mine. So. Welcome, Jason. How are you?
Oh, I'm fine. Thanks a lot. Yeah, I'm fine. Thank you.
Good to see you both. Now, you're going to be talking tonight about Get Counted. Lynn, why don't you kick off and tell us what Get Counted is and why it is?
Well, Get Counted is a campaign to try and get a number on the Yes movement, essentially, a number of people who support independence. One of the reasons why we've felt this is essential to try and get a count is because nobody really knows. The last time there was a vote was the referendum in 2014, and that was 1.6 million that signed up for independence. However, nobody knows what that figure is like now. So you can't really go by what you see in the media, because they always conflate support for independence with support for a political party, with the SNP in particular. And the SNP, as you know, their numbers went right up after 2014, and they've been tumbling quite consistently ever since. So as the support for independence, the support for SNP reduces, so the support for independence is reported as reducing too. And we need, I think, to try and get a real figure for that. So the idea behind the count is to have an ongoing count. It's not like a referendum, which is a snapshot of people think on the day. It's not like polls, which, as you know, are also a snapshot on the day, but can vary according to the way the the questions asked. There's always margins of error. So this is something that's going to be ongoing. If you support independence, download the app, sign up and get counted, and use that figure to kind of demonstrate to ourselves as much as anybody else just how strong support for independence is. We know it's a big task, but we think it's an essential one because we need to know we're not alone. And I think we mostly know that, but it'd be nice to see the proof of that.
How do you defend, Lynn, somebody from outside, perhaps in the unionist community, saying, well, how can you rely upon this count? I mean, it's not impartial because Lynn is not impartial and neither is Jason. So how can you rely upon the numbers that they produce?
I would say that we are impartial because the numbers are for people who sign up. But when you do download the app and you register, you have to sign a declaration for independence. And the information that we ask for that is pretty much the same as the online polls that end up going to Westminster. I can't remember the name of the company that runs them, but if you get, say, 10,000 signatures, then it has to be debated, or 100,000.
Yeah.
Numbers because I rarely sign them. However, we ask for the same data as they do. So everybody who joins has to sign a declaration of support for independence. But the one thing that makes it completely impartial is that the only thing the app is asking you to support is independence. It's not like signing up to a party, for example, where you're supporting independence by which route that party wants to take. It's not like signing, say, signing up to Salvo, where you're supporting them going ahead to the EU, the European Court of Human Rights. That means you're supporting a policy. Or if you sign up to, for example, Believe in Scotland, that means that you're signing up to them, and they have various policies. One is returning to the EU. So this is simply a question that says, do you support independence? Yes, and that's all. We have got no affiliation with any parties. We're 100% grassroots. They've stripped away everything and come down to the basic question, which is support for independence and nothing else. Because as soon as you add anything else in, it becomes divisive. If you're talking about you're getting rid of the monarchy, you split the vote. So that number's never going to be accurate, because if you say, pro-independence and want to be a republic, you're going to alienate anybody who thinks they might want to support a monarchy. Or if as soon as you say we're going back into the EU, then anybody who wants to go to EFTA or nothing at all is not going to sign it either. So we've stripped away everything. It's simply saying, I support independence and nothing else. So in that respect, we're completely impartial.
Okay. So how does the IndyApp work, Jason?
Well, I mean, to your neutrality point, I wouldn't say we're neutral, but what we are is it's live. So when somebody downloads the app, they register, they give their name, their email, and their postcode. And what that does, that's the same as Lynn was saying, that's the same standards of authentication that's required for UK government petitions.
Yeah.
So that's what we aimed for.
Okay.
Once you do that, you then sign you click the declaration, you click the GDPR and the terms and conditions, and then you're counted. So you're counted along with every other person that signed that declaration. But if you, for some reason, decide, no, independence isn't for me anymore, and you decide to remove yourself from the app, the number goes down by 1. Okay. And if the next person that joins, the number goes up by 1. So okay. it's a continual updated take on independence. So if we'd done this for like the last 10 years, we'd be doing okay. It'd be quite an accurate take on our desire for independence, independent of party politics.
So we can see the logo behind you, and when I put my phone up here, you can see this is the IndyApp, and I can press on this, and it will take me to the parts of the app.
Yeah.
So this is, I would say to everyone watching and listening, it's terribly easy to do. You've made it effectively very user friendly. It is incredibly straightforward to to download the app and then to start using it.
And
you can get in touch with other people. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, the idea with this is that we've got there's 56% of the population are looking for independence as we speak right now. That's by the last polling, and so that's 50 at the moment. However, the Yes movement that we talk about as the movement, it's a movement of activists. It's a movement of us, the crazies, the people that spend their whole life doing this thing, But the thing is, the 56% of people are ordinary voters.
Yeah.
And during 2014, that's what the Yes movement was. The Yes movement was ordinary voters who were willing to self-declare and say, I'm going to vote yes when it comes to that vote. Now, when they took away the vote, they no longer had a movement, because we were a movement of voters. And over time, as time has gone, we're further and further and further away from getting another vote. So those voters become just normal voters for political parties. Now, what we are talking about with the Get Counted campaign and the IndyApp itself is to reframe the Yes movement from that idea that essentially the Yes movement got turned into the 140,000 people, got counted as the 140,000 people who joined a political party. But what we have to do is reframe it back to the Yes supporter, the voter, the normal, ordinary person in the street. And so what we're talking about here is download the app, get counted with everybody else, and that puts you. That's a way of actually joining the movement. That's a way of creating a mass movement. And once you're in there, you don't need to do anything else. We're not telling you to become an activist. We're not asking you to do anything else. Just declare your support for independence. And then the next time something happens with Labour or the news, or you want to throw a slipper at the telly because you're so upset, once that happens, then you can easily make the next step, which is go to the Yes directory on the app, look up your local group, your local grassroots group, hit the contact button, and you'll be put directly in contact with a grassroots member in your local area that's there, that can introduce you how to campaign in grassroots, the secrets of it, the difference between operating at a grassroots level and getting involved in party politics, which is totally different. That's what the app is. It's a way of connecting and building a mass membership of Yes, and then giving it the capability to connect with like-minded people when they want to, not pressing people to do it, but just when they feel they're ready.
I think that's the issue. Lynn, can I ask you, as I listen to Jason, Jason is very articulate, and he's described the app in just an excellent way, because it really helps people understand what it's all about. But the question that crops up, and it's hard to overlook this, is at some stage, an activist needs to act, i.e. they need to either put a cross on a ballot paper and or help other people to decide where to put their cross on a ballot paper. And surely this is where the difficulty begins, because even though you're not party political, at the end of the day, the people that you're assisting will end up voting for a political party. Isn't that the case?
Well, yes, but that's not really what the app is for. As Jason said, and as I said initially, that Get Counted is just declare your support for independence. Let's count how many Yes supporters are actually out there. The workings of the app that you showed us, the different groups, etc. They're for people who want to get active. But I think it's vitally important to keep some clear blue water between the grassroots side of the movement and the parties, because we can all support independence without necessarily wanting to support any of the parties. So we do have to tick a box, but activists for parties have their own role within the party. This is about the grassroots communicating with one another. So while there's a Yes campaign, and eventually we're hoping there will be a campaign of some sort coming along at some point where we can work for independence, that's not the same as campaigning for a party. So this is not about people who don't support parties, because you can be a part of anything. You can be an SNP or ALBA or SNP member and also sign up to the app. There's no exclusions in that. So
no, I'm not suggesting the exclusion is with you and Jason. Quite the opposite. I think the exclusion comes from the mainstream, as it were, the actual political parties themselves. I mean, for example, I hear tonight that John Swinney has set his face against any independence convention, which is hard for me, for one, to understand, because I would have thought that what you're doing is to be applauded, and the political parties perhaps ought to be looking at what you're doing and saying, hey, here's a model that we ought to be considering or even following, i.e. everybody getting together under the umbrella. Yeah. Whereas the main political party appears to be heading off on its sweet lonesome.
Can I add something to what Lynn was saying? I think if you're, I get where you're coming from, but I also like to add that the process of getting counted works in order that once we get a mass group of people counted and they want to go ahead and meet and get active, they can. However, it's a two-way street. When somebody gets counted, they give their postcode, they give their name, and they are directly contactable via private message on the app through their phone. Right. So what that does is every single person that downloads the app and gets counted is mapped for the grassroots Yes movement, not for party politics. During 2014, we had a hell of a time mapping our Yes support in large, because we could, for GDPR purpose, we couldn't use the SNP's stuff, and also we didn't have the expertise to go out and chap doors and do all that stuff and map the support for Yes in time for the referendum. So we were way behind the curve. But with this, it means that any supporter that goes out and gets another pal or a friend or a family member or whatever registered and counted means that person is accessible to the local campaigners, the grassroots campaigners, when the time comes. So we're building a database. It's not it doesn't need to be deep data or anything. It's simply a easy communications route to get a hold and map where our Yes support is, and also where our Yes support isn't. So we know, like, for an example of this is, we could find that there's 3,000 people in an area who are all pro-Indy and there's no Yes group there.
Yeah.
And we can contact those people and put them in touch with another Yes group, and they can help each other set up which is local. Essentially, it's a campaign branch. You know,
and they can do this themselves through the.
It's totally through the app now.
I think my point was a broader one. It seems to me that what you and Lynn are doing is integrating, i.e., you're collecting people who share a common viewpoint in order to make that their involvement concrete and perhaps a multiplier effect.
Yeah.
But my point was a larger one, which is that you also, at the same time you're doing this, the main political party, ostensibly for independence, is heading off in the opposite direction, saying we don't want to talk with anyone. And you think, oh, hold on a second here, guys. You know, what Lynn and Jason are doing seems laudable, but to take this sort of rather dog in the manger attitude and say, well, you know, we're the biggest party, we don't need help from anyone, and we're not really interested. It strikes, to me anyway, it strikes a strange note that they're headed off in a sort of, I was going to say separate direction, but I suspect you know what I mean. Don't you come across this all the time with people saying, well, we're not quite sure, we're concerned about what the political parties are doing. It may actually be one of the things that makes your whole process popular, because people look at that perhaps and say, oh, I don't like that approach, but I do rather like what Jason and Lynn are doing with Get Counted, because that strikes me as something useful. Because it's pulling people together.
So I was going to say, I've not had that directly said with regard to the app, but we have a monthly street stall in Haddington, and what people say to us all the time is that they're sick to death of political parties, they just want independence, and that's why they come to us. Because when we have our street stalls, we've got Alba on our left and the SNP on our right, and we're in the middle, and they might stop at all three stalls, but when they come to us, they just say, I'm so sick of parties, you know. So I do think this is my personal opinion now, and I'm not here to do any party bashing, but for a long time the SNP was the sole party, the sole vehicle towards independence. Yeah. And now we've got about 8 or 9 parties, some of them so minuscule you might not even know that they exist, like the Sovereignty Party and all that kind of thing. But you've got quite a lot now, and I think a wee bit like Labour felt their noses out of joint when they suddenly found they weren't the natural rulers of Scotland and the SNP had kind of pushed them aside. I have a feeling the SNP don't want any usurpers to come along and take their crown, and they don't seem to want to talk to anybody else in case they lose the control that they currently believe that they have, which is why, you know, because they needed the Greens to have a majority last time round, they were happy to work in order to get the majority with them. But I think ultimately they are afraid of losing control the way that the Labour Party did, and they are therefore, you know, just turning against everybody, which is a shame, because, you know, they occasionally talk to people in the Yes movement and then they say, yes, we're in contact with the grassroots, but they might talk to selected and preferred individuals within the grassroots movement. They might have one conversation, that's it, and they'll say, we've talked to the grassroots. But I really think the SNP would like to have 100% control over independence, and I don't think the grassroots is having it. So,
can I just say also with this that I think there's a contradiction in what is happening, but it's structural. It's a structural thing. It's that politics is an electoral game, and political parties are in competition with each other, even if they support the same things. They are entities that are in electoral competition with each other. They may share a few things here and there, but essentially they're in competition with each other. Now, during the referendum, the Yes movement, the SNP, the Greens, the SSP, they came together because they understood that we need a majority here, and political parties divide the vote. They don't bring it together. So what they came up with was all parties and none. And we're not reinventing the wheel here. We're not creating some magical thing. This has been done. It was agreed. We're all on. I mean, this is why trying to recreate a brand when we've got a fabulous brand, which is Yes, and everybody knows it, and we're all behind it, and we all slit each other's throats, and it's all done. All the killing's been done, and we're all supporting in this thing. And what's happened is that all parties and none framework only happens under a referendum. And when a referendum doesn't occur for 10 years and isn't in the horizon for any, you can't hold together political parties and people who support different I mean, 40% of the Labour voters are pro-Indy. But every time that there's an election, they get counted as no voters, which is ridiculous. But this is where we are. So what we are proposing and what we are saying is that we need to remove ourselves from the electoral party politics of the UK. I mean, it happens in Scotland, but they're UK elections. And so we remove the Yes from that internecine fighting, because when you look at it from a Yes point of view, we go, oh God, that's internecine fighting. But when you look at it from a wider understanding of politics. That's our great strength, diversity. We've got 9 parties. We've got lots of different views. We're a nation. We've got lots of different party political views in a nation. It's normal. It's diversity. However, in order for that diversity to operate effectively as a movement, you must all initially come together and get counted for independence, even though you all want independence for different reasons and for different purposes. You all want independence so you can all come together and get counted. And in the process of getting counted, you're developing the muscle and the campaign power for when that referendum or electoral event happens to do with independence. We're in a fantastic spot to, hit the road running and really, take it. So
what happens if there isn't a referendum?
Then if you have a mass membership movement who wants independence, and it's growing, then the parties of that country have to respond to that democratic reality. And at the moment, this is the problem with Scotland. Scotland has 56% of the population want independence, but they are simply voters at the moment. They're not a mass membership movement, and we haven't had a mass membership movement for 10 years.
I hate to play devil's advocate, but I'm tempted to do so. What happens at the end of the day? You've got a mass, let's say, get counted, ends up with over 1 million subscribers, a very large amount indeed, perhaps. And Westminster says, never know, because it would be crazy in political terms to say no. What they will do is persist and say not yet. Mm-hmm. So where do you all go? Because lots of people have put in lots of effort over lots of years, and people get tired. There's fatigue sets in, because even though they regard what you're doing as worthy, what they're saying is, I can't see any conclusion to this. We keep saying yes, and there's more and more of us every year, and yet, because we subscribe to the Constitution of the United Kingdom, which enables a parliament in Westminster to determine whether we can have a vote or not, then all they have to do is keep saying not yet. Where does that take you?
Will I answer that, Lynn, or do you want to?
I was just going to say very briefly that there's more than one route to independence, and I know that people view the Section 30 request and a referendum as something that's in the gift of Westminster, and we have to go down that route. And there are other schools of thought that argue completely against that, saying that we are a colonised nation and we have the right to do that kind of thing ourselves. I can't remember the details of it, but I think somebody has said that it actually is within the Scotland Act that we can do certain things. So I think there's lots of different ways to independence, and most independence supporters are happy for any route. We don't care how we get there, we just want to get there. So I think if the numbers did get over 1 million, as you suggested, as a figure for discussion, it'd be much more difficult for an elected party to ignore a number like that. At the moment, the count, because we've only just started the Get Launched campaign, we're currently at, I'm just looking now, 6,466 people have signed up to it so far. That's more than the membership of the Lib Dems. Our next target is the membership of the Scottish Tories, which is 6,900 and something. So, we're building up, So if you want to beat the Tories, download this app, get registered.
There you are, folks.
More Indie supporters than Tories.
And what's the membership of the Labour Party?
Is that the one that's 58,000? I can't remember. Really? One of our people give a list of them all. So I think Tories are next, and then there's Alpha, and then there's the Greens, and then there's SNP, and then Labour, I think. I can't remember what the numbers are.
Let me tell you what my take on this is, and it's been reinforced by listening to you both tonight, is the Yes side is absolutely stuffed with talented people.
Totally.
I mean, honestly, when I look at the embarrassment of riches that the Yes movement has, and you guys are representative of that, I think to myself, with all of that wealth, because it is true wealth. It's the sort of wealth that, it's like investing. It grows from year to year. With all that wealth, you would expect there to be an end product. You would expect, looking at it from a distance even, to say, with all of that richness and all of that talent, you would expect something concrete to have happened by now, or to be in train, and yet I don't see any of that. What I see, by contrast, and I would welcome your thoughts on this, what I see by contrast is ossification, i.e. enormous efforts are going into making sure that everything that exists just now can operate to maximum effectiveness. Mm-hmm. Whereas what you're doing is to say, no, it's not about making what's happening now majorly effective. It's about changing what's happening just now.
Yeah, totally.
But I don't see that happening.
You're asking us to look into the future. All I can say to you with this is that, one, if we had 200,000, I think that some of the reports were 180,000 to 200,000 people marching in the streets of Edinburgh. We've had that. We've 150,000 people marching in the streets of Glasgow.
Yeah,
we've had this now. In a normal environment, if you have, for revolutions, for big civic change, that is more than enough of a percentage of the Scottish population to be on the streets to get change. However, those marches were simply marches. They weren't part of it. There was no mass membership behind it. There was no mass movement behind it. Those were people who on a Saturday, who want independence, turned up on a Saturday, did their shoe shopping, walked on the march, went for a dinner, and then went home. Right? They weren't connected. They weren't interconnected. They weren't speaking to each other, and they weren't leverageable. However, what they did do was get a lot more speakers on the stage than if it had been one man and his dog. Now, what we are proposing is not that. What we are proposing is creating a networked mass membership movement. And from that, it's a numbers game. If you get 1 million people registered on the app that you put, we're not aiming for 1 million people, but say you get 200,000 people registered on the app, as one of those marches was. It's a numbers game. All you need is 3-4% of those people to become activists in their communities. And then that what happens then is that march becomes 500,000, not 200,000, and the activists from that become larger. You only need to have 3.5% of the population on the streets is the tipping point that usually creates massive change in society. And what we're talking about, but that can't just be people going shopping. We have 50,000 people going to the football to watch Rangers every. We have those numbers. It's that it has to be connected to a movement.
Yeah.
And we're saying this is the truth. How do you join the Yes movement? How do you 10 years after, with 56% of the population wanting independence? How do you join the Yes grassroots movement if you want to?
I think
and we're providing a way.
I think that, I think that's laudable. But here you are, you join the Yes movement because you've listened to Lynn, you've listened to Jason, you're enthused, because enthusiasm is contagious. The fact that you're enthusiastic means that other people will become enthusiastic. It's just the way people operate. Nobody's going to join anything where they think there is no enthusiasm. It's the very opposite. So you're enthusiastic, off you go. And then years go by and nothing happens. Because the political parties cannot get their act together.
Well, can I say to you that the reason that years go by and nothing happens is because the political parties can do nothing. There is no pressure on them, because the British political system is you vote for a party once every 5 years, and that party can do anything it likes in between. So the only time that they need to even promise you to do anything is the late 5 years later. That's the difference. Now, in 2014, everybody that I know that was campaigning outside Dole offices, outside in Saltcoats, out there campaigning, we were all saying, this has to happen now. It has to happen yesterday. People are dying without independence, and we need it now. Well, as soon as those activists became politicians, it stopped from being, we need it now, to, well, we need it by next election. And that's 5 years. Now, this is why we're saying, look, we remove the creation of a movement from party politics to keep the urgency and to keep everybody together. But the events come and come and come.
Okay.
We've got an election in 2 years. We've got an,
So you keep that enthusiasm and you get people connected, but at some stage, right, people are going to become unenthusiastic if there's no concrete result that flows from that.
But there will be. There will be. Because there's many different opportunities to do action. The only reason it's not being done is because we are relying on politicians who have signed themselves up to the Act, the Scotland Act. Yeah. And the Scotland Act says you can't do that. Those politicians all sign up to it. Now, we're not politicians and we're not going to sign up to any of that. And neither are any of the people who get counted and want to go ahead and get things moving. Right. I'm not telling you what we'll do, because I'm not the one that's going to do it. What you have said at the beginning is Scotland is full of creative and inspiring people who are greatly, they're leaders, but they have no movement to lead at the moment. And all we're talking about doing is trying to put a movement together that can either create its own leadership or can come behind a leadership that is already out there and just wash with leadership.
Let me examine that for a second, John.
Yeah.
You say an organisation that can create its own leadership. I mean, there'd be no point to that unless it was a political party. How could you exercise control or any influence over the political process unless you're a recognised political party?
Well, yes, but I mean, it's when you would form that, whether you need to form that. If you already have a large networked mass movement that wants independence, then I can tell you that the SNP or whichever political party is in power will be listening, and they will be scared not to be listening because they're democratically, it's an enormous power base outside of party politics that they have to listen to. And if they don't listen to that, the reason that they will be listening to it is because the very first thing that they'll be thinking is, oh my God, these people are going to set up a political party. Now, we're not, and we have no plans to do that, but that's the way that the political mind thinks. They're always on the lookout to be scared of, somebody usurping their position. And that's something that politics in Scotland doesn't really have. It doesn't have. We don't really have a way. We operate on the voter operates under a massive democratic deficit, in as much as after the no vote, I went and told every no voter that was in Largs, because they knew me as a yes, the guy in the yes shop. So I got lots and lots of people approach me, giving me the ribbon. Oh, you lost. And I said to them, look, what you've done is you've just removed my choice in what I can vote. I have to vote for the party that's going to put independence on its agenda, whether I agree with the other policies that party's got. I have to vote for SNP, and that's where we were. It's not necessarily like that just now, but that's the compression that is within Scottish democracy, inverted commas. Half of us have got no choice.
I'm still not clear. I hesitate to keep raising this, but can I ask you, Lynn? I mean, how do you see the future? Let's assume that we're not here now, but we're here a year from now. Yeah. How do you see the shape of Scottish politics with an invigorated Get Counted in operation for a year. What's your vision?
My vision is of lots and lots of people who are not necessarily party political, but of course possibly including some who are, of working together for ways to circumvent any obstacles that are thrown into our path for achieving independence. I know that you said earlier about the movement being kind of ossified and not going anywhere, but there's lots going on behind the scenes, which I know you'll be well aware of. For example, the SSRG, under the guidance of Henry Ferguson, I think, is doing some terrific stuff in trying to get our position actually clarified, because we think we're in a union of equals, and according to some of the research that's been done, we're not. We're actually a colony. I've read some of the stuff that says that the actual Treaty of Union, or the Act of Union, was never actually implemented. We were told it was, and we think it's a union, but it's not. So there's lots of research going on that way. There's groups like Salvo, who I mentioned earlier, who are going to the European Court of Human Rights with our claim of right, although there's others who dismiss that as a dead letter. So there's lots and lots of different ways that the grassroots are forming all these organizations, looking into currency, looking into all sorts of things, and they are working towards getting not necessarily a get-out clause, but maybe you could describe it as that, because if it turned out that the Act of Union was never implemented, if that ever gets verified, then we're not in a union, we're an independent country without anyone having to ask for a Section 30 or having to lift a finger or go and vote. So there are an awful lot of different routes to independence, like I said, and most Indie supporters don't really care how we get there, as long as we do. And I don't think it's a case of, well, we need to try this way first. If that doesn't work, let's try that. It's like a football match. We're all looking for the same goal, but you've got 10 players who are all trying to score. And when they get within reach of scoring, they don't stop and have a conference about who's going to score. First man there kicks the ball. And that's how independence should be. It should be whoever gets the opportunity to get it for us, gets it. So although we'd like to see the parties doing more and standing up for Scotland more, I honestly think that if we can get the grassroots talking to each other, and that's ultimately what the IndyApp can do, then no matter what frustrations we're having, and we've had a lot over the last 10 years, as you know, because things happen and our hopes go up, and then things happen and our hopes come crashing down again. So the movement is kind of in the doldrums at the moment, but you never know what's going to happen in the next week that might turn things around. I mean, seeing how Reform did in the English elections is something that will galvanise people too.
Yeah, I think that's right.
This allows us to talk to one another, and with a national communication tool like this, we can then formulate something together. We can say, well, we'll work on getting independence this way, we'll work on doing that, we'll work on lobbying our parliament, etc. So I see it being a platform that's free from billionaires. It's not like X that's going to suddenly be bought over by Elon Musk and everything changed. It's not owned by anybody. Well, obviously Jason and the rest of the NYR own the servers that support it, but there's no leaders, there's nothing to own. It's the only secure platform that everybody can agree to go to. Some are on X, some are on Facebook, some have gone to Blue Sky, etc. You never know when these platforms will change, but this platform is fixed. It's the only one that's just for Indie supporters to communicate together. So I see the IndyApp's role in trying to galvanise our politicians in being a way that they can communicate nationally with one another, and between us all work out how we're going to address this. We can't say exactly how that will happen, but it's down to grassroots people.
I hear exactly where you're coming from, John, but what we're talking about really isn't the solution. We're not saying it's the solution. We're saying it's where the solution will come from. Yeah. I mean, it's at the moment we have no momentum. And it's very difficult. Without momentum, it's very difficult to even remember what momentum gives you and what it achieves itself. Now, even when the SNP refused to stop clapping that created lots of people joining the SNP. When the SNP got thrown out of Westminster, that created lots of support, and it made everybody feel better. Now all of that stuff has stopped, and there is just no momentum. There's nothing to pin anybody's hopes on. Or
I think what strengthens your case, and I'm reading a book just now about the role that Facebook played in getting Donald Trump elected the first time round, and more than likely did the same again recently. And the Trump campaign had people embedded in Facebook. They were able to buy the data. They were able to put together a process that enabled them to reach out to individual voters. And I would imagine if there were ever a referendum in the future, that would be the process that would be used by the No campaign, because the regular organs in Scotland are now tarnished. The print media is tarnished, and as for the broadcasting media, most SNP supporters or independent supporters would regard it as being beyond the pale. It's not recoverable. So these would then suffer a credibility issue. And increasingly, I suspect, all elections will be predicated upon social media. And if you've already entered that domain, as it were, by get counted, it seems to me that's a laudable approach, not just because of the inherent qualities that you've described, but also it anticipates how the next election will be fought otherwise. It will not be fought by putting pamphlets through people's doors. I think that's ancient, perhaps. The technology will more than likely determine the outcome of all future elections, and certainly any referendum, because it allows you to target people precisely. And what you're doing is putting together a database of people. That's very powerful. I mean, that's incredibly powerful, because that's essentially what Facebook does.
Well, ours is a wee bit, ours is much more in the spirit of 2014, because it's like, when elections are fought, everybody talks about demographics this and demographics that, and who we're going to focus this focus group talks about this demographic, this focus group is on this demo, and we tried to. Now in 2014, the way that we did it was pensioners spoke to pensioners, Celtic supporters spoke to Celtic supporters, Rangers spoke to Rangers, and all the way down the line. Teenagers spoke to teenagers, and this is how we did it. So the way that we are doing this is essentially we're getting everybody counted. We have our everybody is open. This is open to everybody. It's wheelie bins for yes. You know what I mean? Everybody can come in this thing, and then once you're in it, you can then set up your specific, the thing that you know about, the thing that's important to you, the thing that you want to argue with and convince people with. And that's in local communities who all know their own local needs and their own things that will bring you their local citizens towards yes. And we give them direct access to all the yes support that's in their area.
Yeah.
So it's face to face.
I think that's a given, Jason. I think what I'm suggesting is that because the next elections and all elections in the future will be determined by effective social media, it means that you've already established a process which enables people to have a connection. But counter to that will be a social media process whereby individuals will be contacted. And the reason that Trump was successful is because Facebook allowed him to say to you, if you vote for this guy's president, you will get independence for Scotland, and to go to let me keep it in American terms.
Yeah.
To the person, to you, to say, look, if you believe in tariffs, I'll make sure you get tariffs. And assuming that Lynn was next door, the message she would get from the same campaign is that I'm completely opposed to tariffs.
Yeah.
And if I get elected, and what that does is, and it's unseen.
Mm-hmm.
So in other words, nobody's measuring it except the campaign themselves.
Yeah.
And if you get a chance to read the book that was recently published on the woman who was at the centerpiece of some of this, it's quite shocking the degree of influence that these processes have, and it's shocking because we don't know it's happening. I think that's the thing, and it seems to me what's laudable about what you guys are doing is that you're doing this openly. You're saying this is what we're doing. You're not hiding it in some covert way, working with one particular campaign. You're saying this is open. You can join. You don't have to join. It's up to you, and we'll put you in touch. I think that's very powerful. And I think because you've done what you've done, it will make it more difficult for these hidden campaigns to be as effective in Scotland as they have been elsewhere in the world.
Yeah.
Because so many really weird people have been elected in different parts of the world simply based on their use of Facebook and other social media. You're preventing a counterbalance.
Yeah. Well, just one thing I would like to just underline to your viewers there really quickly is that we have no algorithms in the app, and we had to bend over back. We had to redesign. We had to create new forms of navigation, of dealing with data for the user. We had to invent stuff in order not to have algorithms, because it's exactly that. An algorithm has to be created by an individual, and when that individual creates it, they control.
Yeah.
So that's, we really want to underline that.
And I would suggest to you that's a selling point.
Totally. Yeah.
I would suggest to you that if you're doing any sort of marketing, what you've just said is hugely powerful. In other words, unlike other social media, we are not going to flog your data. We're not going to do it. This is because we have this one focus. Because people are signing up for Facebook every day, and they don't know what's happening to the data. They haven't a clue. Yeah. And if they knew, they would stop using these platforms right away. Yeah. Because they're absolutely dynamite. Anyway,
people never read the terms and conditions, unfortunately. And you do, and you realise, I mean, I discovered, this is a very brief, I'll go off. I had, for some reason, my Duolingo account kept getting linked to Facebook. So I went in to try and remove it. And I found that Facebook had me attached to about 200 apps, some of which most of which I'd never used, that could all see my data, apps I'd never heard of. So, it's not a friendly platform. None of them are. But
that's the saying, Lynn, is if you're not paying for the product, you are the product.
That's it. So, if that's not scary, nothing is. Believe me.
No. Well, I would say that I think people are wising up, in relation to what you were saying about not even realising they're being manipulated. I think they are now, because we were watching how the BBC has had Nigel Farage as the most frequent guest ever on Question Time.
Yeah.
And he was never an elected politician. And they've been really sort of pushing reform. And that's not gone unnoticed, that the BBC have got behind that. And you were saying yourself earlier that you think that's what's going to be pushed here. We see that in Scotland. And I think people are aware that, what you see on X or Facebook, or probably even on Blue Sky too, is not necessarily what you've chosen to see. Things are pushed at you. Yes. And as soon as you start to notice, why am I being shown that? I mean, on Facebook the other day, I was being shown clips from that old sitcom Mind Your Language. And I thought, what? Why? I've never watched this, not since it was on TV in the 70s. So, and that makes you think to yourself, why am I being shown this? And you realise you're being marketed at.
Yeah.
And I think we've got wise to that from an electoral point of view as well.
Yeah.
I think that's a very good point.
And I would also say that, the thing that we're talking about is it's not just it's in comparison to social media as we know it, but this isn't really what we are creating. It's not, we're not in competition with Blue Sky or Twitter or Facebook or these. This is about campaign, organizational, being able to contact like-minded people and help each other and mentor each other and all these things. And in 20, when was it, when the Catalans had their referendum, this is what happened, is that Facebook, people with Facebook accounts, they didn't get their accounts closed down. Facebook just stopped sending it to the right people and sent it to the wrong people, and their message couldn't get out. And the only really effective tool that they had at the time, it was an app, because the government could come and take away computers and things from set places, but they couldn't go into your hand, your pocket, and take out the thing. Now that was reinforced why we originally did it, but that's why we originally did. It's a native app on your phone, and it's yours, and that's part of the reason that we're
Let me ask you the question that will be in everyone's mind just now, which is that they're looking at what you guys have done and they're saying this is great. How enthusiastic are the political parties in all of this to you?
Not very enthusiastic at all, because if you just need to be logical about it and think this isn't just an SNP thing. This is any political party that's out there in the British system, and that is, the app is designed to make. Imagine we take the voters, and the voters can find any branch that they like to go to of any party. Straight away. It's not my party that they can go to. They can go to any. They can look at all the different branches, and they can decide which party to join by seeing which branch they like the best, right? So that's the first problem. Second problem for a political party is that all the branches that would be there would be able to speak to each other directly, not through the top. So every time that a party, say the SNP, for example, but this is account to everybody, is that when the party has their annual conference, every branch could have had already sat back and talked to each other about what they want to see happen at that, and how they want to, what policies they want to go forward, and what kind of pressure they want to put on their government in order to make change. Now, a government, the SNP doesn't let their branches talk to each other in that manner. You know, that for a good reason, because the branches are from the top down. They get given the messaging and the briefing, and then it gets taken from there, taken out to the communities and rolled out. It doesn't roll back up. Yeah. So that's really what the app is about. It doesn't suit party political structures.
I think that process is doomed, I have to say, because, you know, for a whole bunch of reasons that we don't have time to go into. But we've only got a couple of minutes left. Lynn, are there any last thoughts you would like to leave with our audience?
The only thing I would say is, you know, you can be a member of a party or not. You can be signed up to any membership organisation, such as, you know, Salvo, Believe in Scotland, anything else. You can be a part of all of these things. Signing up to the IndyApp is just another thing that you can sign up to, but it's got no strings attached. So sign up, declare support, and take it further if you want to, but don't if you don't want to.
Okay, thanks. Jason, you've got 2 minutes.
What I would say is, I'd say, look, we're talking here, all we need to do to get the count up is for you to go out and talk to your Yes supporting friends, family and colleagues. It's them. It's like 2014. It's the spirit of 2014. Margaret MacDonald, get one other person, you know, to vote yes, and we've won. Well, we're saying just get another person to get counted, and then vote, and the count expands exponentially. It's in your hands. It's so decentralized. You download the app and you show it to your colleagues, and you can pre-register them, and that's it. It starts growing. So it's the spirit of 2014, but with the tech of 2025. That's
excellent. What we're aiming for. The fundamental message is, don't feel there's nothing you can do. There's lots of things you can do, and this is one of them.
Exactly.
Lynn,
we're the grassroots.
Absolutely. Lynn, Jason, thanks very much indeed. We seek to educate, entertain, and inform, and you've done all of these things tonight. And I'm
Thank you
very
very
grateful
much.
to you both.
Thanks for having us.
Take care.
Thanks
I wish
for-
every success.
Thanks for
Thank
the
you.
opportunity. Thanks a
Thank
lot.
you. Good night, everyone. See you next week. There's a pregnant pause while Kevin is busy moving things around in the background.